film and digital. And I thought I'd call it film versus digital because there seems to be still an ongoing battle between the dark side and the light side. And anybody that's shot film knows its qualities and its and appreciates its worth. The trouble is that in this day and age we've got such an influx of photographers who have never experienced film, who think it's like an antiquated, distant past, stone and chalk, medium. And what people are forgetting is that it's, many people still use it. I shoot it occasionally, not as much as I should. Some high-end photographers still shoot film predominantly. Some high-end magazines and publications still prefer film over digital because of its quality. So I thought today what I would do is I'd talk you through my experience of shooting on film against shooting on digital. The reasons why I think film is better still, not just better, it's different than digital, and why digital is kind of like great but has its limitations, and pretty quickly you come across those limitations. So that's kind of what the podcast is about today. So I'm not here to kind of like give you definitive answers about, the technical aspects as to why film is better than digital. It is. I'll cover my feelings as to why I think it is. But for me, it's more about process rather than quality, or rather than convenience, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I'm waffling a little bit because I wish I was on holiday still. I've just come back from Malta and I'm a bit weary. I've been back to work for a week and a bit tired, and wish I was still on the beach in Malta, which is where I was this time last week. But that's a different story. And I'm going to podcast about a shoot I did there as well as we go along. But just for today, I wanted to talk about film because I set this stuff up before I went on holiday and didn't get a chance to shoot it. So I thought today we would kind of make our way through my adventures in film and digital and tell you why I think film still holds it over digital. Which is kind of strange really, because I really shoot film and I should practice what I preach, but from a practical perspective, from the practicalities of shooting film, it's not really that easy for me to do. And it could be, I have a studio here, I have a space, I could make a dark room, I could do all that here quite easily, I could make it very functional. For me, I'm short on time, I'm time poor, as they say. And to shoot film, develop it, make your prints and fine tune and do things properly, professionally, and to a real high standard takes time. And I am absolutely time poor. So it's not an excuse, it's a reason. And I guess that's probably why a lot of people don't shoot film, because they're time poor. And I guess, in this day and age, there's not a real lot we can do about that. Other than, sit here and reminisce about how good film is and why we love to shoot it and why we don't. And I was talking to my stepson Evan about this a few weeks back about, musicians are now all digital or predominantly digital, and what was the difference like between digital and analog. Because I recorded some demos on analog back in the day, and he wanted to know was there a sound difference. And yeah, there is a key sound difference. The switching over to digital, I kind of say it kind of cleaned things up. It took away the edge and some of the romance of shooting on analog, some of the depth of the sounds of the guitars, instruments, voices. And if you listen to music when analog started to become a little less prevalent, mid-late 90s, you can kind of hear a shift in music, how it suddenly started to become very sharp and clean and crisp. And I guess if that's what you like, that's fine, but talk a lot about it, little things like the sound of the drums. If you listen to any band from the 60s, early 70s, and listen to the sound of the drums are just different class because of how they were recorded. And that's kind of lost a little bit now. It's rare that I hear a drum track and think, oh my God, that sounds really, really good. It generally sounds a bit clean. And I think digital photography is a very similar thing. We can equate the two quite similarly, that not just the kind of like the tonal range, the dynamic range and the quality of a digital file opposed to a analog file. There's a distance in how you kind of do it, and what I mean by that is when you're recording on analog or you're shooting on anything analog, you have to pay a lot more time, care and attention to what you're doing, because you can't see whether it's worked until you develop it or until you rewind it and go from start to scratch. And if you want to edit some bits out or make a tweak, it's a lot more of a hands-on process than what it is on a computer. And the two are very similar in how they match up like that. And what I've found is digitally you can shoot with a, I don't, but you can shoot with a, oh, I'll fix that in post kind of mentality, whereas when you recorded analog, you got a completely different approach. So I think your mindset when you're shooting on film is a different mindset to when you're shooting on digital. And also as you're working away on your film, through shooting your roll of film, you can't just, shoot. You can't get the old camera, shoot, and have a quick look. Oh, there's none of that going on. You got to shoot, know what you're doing, make sure your settings are right, know you've got it in focus before you move on to the next shot. And if you're doing something like street or something where the variables are moving a lot and you've only got a small window to shoot, that's where you earn the coin, as I say. Whereas on digital, you can do a quick shot. Is it ballpark? Yeah, I'm shooting in RAW, so I've got a lot of scope. Bang, off you go. It's a different approach altogether. So the attention to detail, the attention to quality, the attention to process that when you're shooting film, I think is a lot more detailed than when you're shooting digital, because of what I just said. One of the things I used to do, I don't teach so much now, for certainly photography skills, but when I first started teaching mainstream photography skills, I used to introduce students to a darkroom process first and to the analog process, and make them learn how to load and shoot a couple of rolls of film, because it slowed them right down. And I found when you slow somebody's process down, they're thinking about it a little more, they're paying a bit more attention. Because an example might be, I think this roll of film I've got in here is it's a 36 exposure, black and white Ilford film, ISO 400, probably about £7 or £8 for that roll of film, and 36 shots, £7 or £8 a shot. It becomes quite expensive. So when you say to students, look, take your time, think about what you're doing, make sure that you've listened to what I've said about apertures, ISOs, make sure you're using the onboard meter if it's working, if not, have you got a light meter? But make sure when you're practicing that you're not wasting film. And even though it was probably only a couple of quid a roll to students, because we used to buy it in big maths length, and our fabulous tech Jerry used to cut it up into smaller reusable rolls. Used to have these little reusable cassettes, so it was a couple of quid a roll for students, but it's still working class students from not affluent backgrounds. £2 a roll, but some becomes quite expensive. So try and teach them to think about it and slow down and make sure they get every shot they can on that roll of film. And as you become more used to it and more apt at it, you can speed things up a little bit, but still you're thinking, am I doing this right? Because I've only got one shot at you. So that process, I think, makes better photographers. It makes for better photographers because they're thinking about what they're doing. They're not just willy-nilly pointing, which is what tends to happen, particularly with new photographers when they're shooting digital. They come in and pick up a camera. It does all the hard work for them if they want it to. And off they go, and they're off and running. And, they're selling prints on eBay or whatever it is within 5 minutes. And analog photography, film photography, doesn't allow you to do that, because you've got to become very good at this part of it, the camera, before you can even progress to the developing the film part of it and the creating a print process. And it's really funny. I got a comment on my Facebook page a few weeks back from a guy, I can't remember his name, whoever you are, guy, hey up mate, saying balls to Photoshop, we don't use Photoshop, Photoshop's cheap, it's shit, haven't used it, never will. Just do a shoot straight out of the camera, straight to print, done. And I hear that a lot from people who don't know any better, and I don't know the guy from Adam, but what I do know is he's wrong. And quite often you find you can't tell people with that mindset that they're wrong, because they've never experienced, from a digital perspective, going through the same stages, because they've not understood what the digital camera's doing. They don't understand the quality difference straight off the camera between a digital file at an old 35 medium format, large format negative. There's just an assumption that because they've done a shot and it looks great on the back of the picture, or in their mind it looks great, that when they transcribe that to a print, it's all done. There's no work in between. And that's just bullshit. That's just patently wrong.